Welcome to File, a monthly conversation with those at the convergence of data privacy, data security, data regulation, records, and governance. I'm Anthony Woodward, the CEO of RecordPoint, and with me today is my co-host, Kris Brown, our Executive Vice President of Presidents, Partners, Evangelism, Solution Engineering, and any other task for the day.
And all other things on my JD. He says, yes, thanks, mate. That just gets worse every single time. But yeah, no, fantastic. Good to see you've landed safely in Seattle. You've managed to avoid any government shutdown issue.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. Slightly delayed flight, but that happens every day of the week. So it was a nice flight over. I waved for air traffic control and
With them,
but yeah, well done. But
they deserve all of our support at this point in time.
I was thinking about this on the flight over. This is probably, I've spoken to Jason a couple of times. Jason Tanner we have on. Fantastic background, analytics strategist, ethicist, founder of Engage AI, and publishes a newsletter that I subscribe to called Behind the Scenes. How are you, Jason?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. And some of the things I've done, and also I think good to hear that you're okay. Like all the what craziness that is going on, that you are letting okay.
Always the reality of the experience versus what you hear in the media. Now, obviously just my experience, but because of what's going on, straight through TSA, nobody there. Plane was only half full. It was a very pleasant flight.
That's good.
I guarantee you that will not be my experience on Saturday, but we'll see what happens. Great to have you here, Jason. Let's start at the top for all of our listeners. I'd love for you to just sort of tell us your story. How do you got to where you are now and what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I started my career working for Suncorp. So for those of you who are in the States, Suncorp is one of the second largest insurer here in Australia. So I work with the actuaries to build the algorithm pricing. And I often tell people I am part of the reason why their home insurance and their motor vehicle insurance is so expensive, because I built them the algorithm pricing and do a bunch of really advanced things that people did quite realize. Fast forward a couple of years, I did data engineering as my boutique consulting business, and where I worked to build their BI dashboard, to build their advanced analytics. And along the way, I discovered something really interesting as part of the prospecting. When you're the business owner, a lot of time you spend is on the prospecting, finding client, winning deal, winning client, and closing deals. And one thing that I discovered that is really interesting when I was doing that consulting with, I've noticed that a lot of my target client, i.e. the head of customer, when they were posting on LinkedIn, they don't get much of engagement. And it's completely understandable because they don't write crazy stuff. They don't write controversial topics. They don't write like influence. And that gave me an opportunity when, if I just engage with some of those people a number of times, often it became really, really easy for me to connect with, and then DM and then invite them to my podcast where I share how a lot of the analytics at various enterprise were using advanced analytics, were using data to run the. Fast forward to 2022, when ChatGPT was introduced to the, I realized that I could actually productize the entire strategy. Do an MVP over a weekend, and we got 2,000 users in a week. In fact, we even had the paying customer on the second day will pay for the entire year. So that was something that I focused over the last 2.5 years. We did Engage AI and we scaled it to 100,000 users around the world. And that's my background. I recently exited the company. I have been building the AI application that people actually want to use.
So I have the bone to pick with you then, Jason. I've just received my Suncorp home insurance uplift for the year, and we need to have a chat, right? So anyway, I won't hold it against you, I promise. But again, given that you're deeply involved in the marketplace in this space, let's start with a simple question. And I know you've answered it in part, obviously, in your own experience, but how are people capitalizing in this AI moment? As you said, ChatGPT has joined us. The opportunity is out there. Agentic AI is sort of a bit of a theme for today. How are people really capitalizing on this AI moment?
It's a good question. So I have been talking to many of my contacts over the last 3 months, and to my surprise, everyone is still sitting on the fence. Well, at least in Australia, my conversations with a lot of different companies suggest that people are still sitting on the fence. A lot of them very much just have implemented in a way that adopting ChatGPT or maybe Google Gemini. They are not too sure exactly what is the next step. To my surprise, not that many people are trying to introduce new product, new opportunity with these new capabilities of the AI that we have known for the last 2.5 years. So I think that's really surprising me. On the other hand, if I speak to some of the startups, suddenly they are trying to do a lot more with the AI, where they certainly try to introduce AI into their product. However, I think the biggest challenge or the biggest gap that I see though is that a lot of the company who certainly do try to introduce AI is that they are very much built like chatbot that is like ChatGPT. I actually think that is not the right solution for the market, for the customer that they are. They should think about how to incorporate the AI into the business operation and solve some of the problems. Saying all that, they are still trying to hire people just to adopt AI in the organization, whereas on the startup mentioned, people are suddenly introducing AI, and then you see a lot of new companies are trying to tap into these opportunities. So that is what I discovered. Is that what you found? The same as
I think I agree, and I was probably going to ask you a follow-up along the lines of what do you think's slowing the enterprise side? Like obviously in startup world, we understand that you're always trying to do more with less. There is this tool out there that's helping you. In reading some of the behind-the-scenes articles, you give some great examples about how organizations like Lovable and others have really just grown enormously from these really small base of employees. But why do you think, and I'm going to lead you here a little bit, do you think it's because we have a bit of respect for that governance and regulation element and people are a little bit worried about, well, what am I putting in there? Or is it just we don't know what we don't know?
Well, there are many reasons. And I think one of the reasons the enterprise often are slow is because there are just too many meeting and approval would be required. And also they have to think about a lot of those things, right? Equally, in terms of the enterprise, I think sometimes the startup people often underestimate is that the enterprise have an existing reputation to worry. So it's easy, like the startup who has got nothing to lose, to introduce AI. So for the enterprise, a lot of these companies, it means that they have to worry about the governance, they have to worry about the ethics, they have to worry that what happens if the AI says some crazy thing that put them on the headline of the newspaper of being a racist AI, all those sort of things. Those are the things. And often equally, from all the conversation that I'm having is one thing that a lot of the new role that the enterprise are hiring in this journey, not only just about adopting AI, but also about setting up the AI governance and the data governance to make sure that they are protecting their existing reputation because they got something to lose. As much as we like to laugh about the enterprise as well, we often forget that, well, that's because they have billions of dollars of revenue that they can just simply ignore it with their reputation.
I'd be interested though, what do you think these risks are? Because clearly on one side, you say the startups just dive in because there's value to be created and they can quickly accrete that, but that has some risk. And then on the flip side, the enterprises are looking at it going, well, until they've gotten rid of most of the risks, I can't lean into it. What are those risks? And how do we look at that in terms of what people have to embrace in terms of these innovations?
I think there are two things that I see a lot in the enterprise world in terms of adopting the AI, right? Number one, putting the AI as a customer. And then the other one is using AI. They have a big engineering team. They introduce AI to the engineers to write software, to write code. I think the second part is not so much of a risk, but if you think about the first part here, where AI as a customer service, that is a really big risk that they have to worry in the way that they have to make sure that the AI is functioning exact with that real surrounding those AI that would not say anything crazy, that would not say anything race, that would not, in fact, insult the customer. So those are the risks that they have to worry. But most importantly, the challenge with the AI, that the form of the AI that we got with the LLM now is that it's a probabilistic system rather than a deterministic system. So in the old day, when I was building the algorithm pricing for Tencom, very often when there was something goes wrong, we literally was able to read the code, trace every single step, figure out what exactly went wrong, so that we can the LLM, the form of the AI that we are using now, unfortunately, is not exactly that way. It's almost like a black box. When you ask one question or when you give them instruction yesterday for exactly the same instruction that you do today, it could come out different. So those are the things in a black box where you don't really know exactly and you cannot be 100% sure exactly how it's going to work. You've got to worry. So that is the thing that is stopping the enterprise to adopt it. But more important is that the search and retrieval is the AI telling correct information. And those are the things that they have to be sure. As they are putting the AI to serve the customer.
Well, an interesting point. I'd love to understand when you think about an AI stack, and we should really probably even give the audience, like, when you say AI, which we said plenty of times, what do you mean by that?
Well, my definition of the AI is that the technology will be able to perform and function the things that the human can do. Is my high level. From my experience of working on this field for close to 20 years now, right, is that the good side, the OpenAI has helped is that it makes so much more company and so much more people to talk about AI. And it's unfortunate side of it, though, that a lot of times when they talk about AI, they very much just talk about ChatGPT or LLM. But there is a bigger world of the AI out there that AI can do. Like, for example, the computer vision. That is one thing that, and when you build it right, it can do and can perform the function that human can do. But very few people understand, let alone talk about that topic. And that's because a lot of people, when they talk about AI, they actually refer to ChatGPT. And is that the same experience that you have?
Yeah, to some extent, I guess you're touching on where I was going with my question. AI is used a bit too loosely right now to mean so many
I
things.
agree.
And so folk have stereotyped it to mean a certain process that looks a lot like ChatGPT. And look, when you're an executive, and I'll spend my day writing a one-page brief to investors based on a question they asked me at 9:00 last night, and I love my investors, and thank you very much for giving me such opportunity to do such things. Hopping off a plane and not sleeping is always fun. But my use there, and I think a lot of executives in business, this is not dissimilar, where I've got to do a thing, I want to do it quickly, I'm not thinking very straight, help me get my thoughts together. It's so fantastic at that, right? It took something that probably would have taken me 4 or 5 hours, I was able to do in an hour. So, that's magical, right? I got to go other than it being my task. But that's only one version or one way of looking at how the AI is implemented. What are the benefits we can get from the evolution we've seen, right? These models that are finely tuned for an application versus, retrievally tuned, so LLMs, are really different. And I'm really interested in your experience, right? This sort of fine-tuned Suncorp, I'm going to give you a series of questions to answer. You're going to come back and answer those, but it's finely tuned to this data set versus this wider tuned LLM and its ability to do retrieval augmented generation, or its ability to give me a response, through that, which comes with different risks.
It does come with different risks. And I would say there are multiple stages of doing a lot of those things, right? Number one is then you fine tune on a very, very specific subject of the data and the information that you want to use it to serve to your audience or your customer, whether it's internal or external. you suddenly want to do that one thing. And then the second step is also the search and retrieval. Because a lot of time, the information is just exactly like how we human would respond to that.
Right. So just, you've written about human biases behind algorithmic decisions, and it'd be really interesting to understand that, because as we before, when we were talking about the definition of AI, you said it was anything replacing a human, which to me is almost any piece of software. Most software is replacing a human function of some sort, right? Like the simplest thing, like using Excel in a spreadsheet, is replacing a human that would tabulate that by hand with a pencil, right? So isn't human biases in everything, behind every algorithm? And do you even want to get rid of them?
Well, that definition sounds also a bit of AI, but let's not worry about that definition. But I think when I say the AI replacing it, what I mean by that is that a lot of those things that are a lot more fluid in a way that the AI can do, rather than just a system where it is very, very rigid. Nevertheless, let's come back to your question in terms of the human bias. So to me, from my experience, I found that there are two types of bias. Number one is the data bias. Number two is the algorithm bias. So let's start with the data bias. So that remind me, whenever I talk about data bias, that remind me one of the projects that we did for university was very much to trying to understand how the health of the investor, professional investor, would impact their return on investment. So one of the things that we had to do is to look at the profile photo of these people, and then we train the algorithm so that we can calculate their BMI. Now, before we start building the algorithm, the thing that we had to figure out and that we had to do is to take in the data of doing the facial recognition or looking at the profile photo and then try to come out the BMI calculation. To do that, we actually have to buy data and we have to source data. And one of them, where is a lot more easier to obtain, is the mugshot photo, i.e. the people who have to have their photo taken before they go into prison. And the data source that we got from that was very specifically from the state. As we were training the data, we started to realize that there was a bias in the data itself, where there are certain race, it's skewed to certain race. And so it means that we were getting really, really good in predicting the BMI for certain race. And we were not really good in predicting the BMI for other races simply because there wasn't enough data in it. So that data bias is a challenge, right? And if you try to put that context into the LLM context, we always talk about the OpenAI are training on how many trillions of the data in the internet. And you step back and you think about all different kind of writing, all different kind of writing material that we can find on data, whether we like it or not. I think that is a data bias where it is skewed to certain direction, and whether it's right or wrong, but here to that. Then the underlying data bias is going to skew to certain directions simply because there is a lot more data to be trained by the AI, to be trained by the big tech, skewing and is heading to certain direction, right? So that is the data bias. And in terms of the algorithm bias, that comes down to your engineer. It comes down to your engineer in terms of how they are building the algorithm and how they are tweaking the algorithm. Equally, what sort of gut review do they put on the algorithm? And from the last 2.5 years, with all these big tech, from Google to X to OpenAI, you can equally see that different company, they have a different taste and different direction in terms of the algorithm, where one is allowing certain things, but the other company doesn't necessarily allow. So those are the two biases that I think it will always be introduced. It will always be there. And that is something that I think that we probably have to worry to certain extent. And that also come back to one of the articles that I wrote a couple of months ago that I talked about the AI severity. And part of the reason why I wrote that is because there's so many conversations to say that, well, Australia should have its own AI and it should have its own value where it is based on the value of Australian. I totally get that at a high level. It sounds great because we shouldn't just use the value of American or China. So that's great. But when it comes to the actual implementation, how do we know that it is actually voicing out different individual and different group of people within the country? So those are the things that human is going to make their judgment, and that will introduce certain bias. So that is my take.
But my head's sort of starting to throb a little bit there, Jason. Like that, it's kind of interesting because we want to create a model that doesn't have bias, and then we're going to introduce an individual you have to choose whether the data coming in is biased or not, but they won't be able to do that at any form of scale. So therefore, they would need to introduce an AI or an algorithm that's going to help them to filter that, which would also then means that someone has to determine what biases they want to or not introduce, and that in itself has its own bias. And the paradox continues. And so I think I agree with the position of wouldn't it be great if, but there's also that, how do you implement those things?
And I think AI that looks at the AI, that checks the AI, and then that AI checks another AI. It's perfect.
I was trying very hard not to do that, but it's exactly what I said. So it's an interesting one. And I think that leads probably to a bit of a follow-up question for me, which is assuming that there's not much that we can do about that, or that maybe we shouldn't do much about that and actually just check for. And again, I'm scratching my head as I say these things out loud, because it's like even in using a ChatGPT or a Gemini and asking questions, performing outcomes, and getting it to perform outcomes for me and getting the results, I still need to review and check. And I think that there's that education element there in that we need to help it understand. It's there to help. As Anthony said it, when your boss tells you have to do a bunch of stuff, you can get it done on the plane really quickly and punch out the other and maybe get some sleep. Thanks, boss. But at the same time, there is that element of you still have to be cognizant this is your output, and therefore escalate that up now to the business, and you still have to be cognizant as an organization, what are you using AI for and how are you regulating that? And I think, we're starting to see a lot of examples of obviously the AI adoption outpacing regulation and governance. But there is a very large portion of organizations now saying that they've got some form of AI governance policy in place. Some of the policies that I've seen are thou shalt not use AI, which is probably not a great one. But that policy is fine, but it's now about practice. And how can organizations continue to accelerate that innovation without compromising on trust or compliance?
So that is really when the organization, they have to implement and they have to use certain technology to put that in place, to put that safeguard and to put that as a guardrail. They have to do something about it. It has got to be more than just a checkbox to say, have we done this? Have we done that? I think they have to start exploring one of the technology that is available out there to help them to do the AI governance, to help them to do the data governing, so that the AI employee who use AI to perform the certain function will always be bounded by the policy that they believe in. And whether the employee are hacking and reviewing. One of the words that I often use in describing these scenarios is that the taste. They in 5 to 10 years time, or especially in my kids' generation. So my kid is 7 and 5 now, so they literally are going to grow up in the AI native world, right? Is that how much taste do they have in terms of their work? Do they just rely on the AI to give them without checking, without adding their thought, without adding their personality in there? Or do they actually want to review and add their thought and add their personality? We are going to have people with all different kinds of taste. You'll always have the people who are just going to take whatever AI is giving to them. On the other spectrum, you're going to have the people who will say, you know what, I don't want to use AI at all. And you have the people, and you're going to have the people, a very, very large group of the people in the middle, and their taste equally it's going in all different kinds of spectrum in terms of how much exactly they are going to audit you and adding in their personal thoughts into the output every day.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, it's that level of understanding that you need to check. It's that level of understanding the data that you are feeding in. It's the putting those guardrails in place. And it will continue to happen even here in Australia. More recently, there was a very large organisation involved in a government contract where they produced a report which clearly had hallucinated all the way through the report with made-up links and other things. And it's like, the report should have been produced cheaper for both sides. Obviously, ultimately having AI workers do that work means that they should be able to do things faster and cheaper, and there's a benefit to that. But at the same time, there should have been checks and balances in place that the output and the influence on that outcome of that document wasn't so great that the document was effectively wrong. I think there's that balance, and it's certainly these are sorts of things that you've addressed in some of your
Yeah, so in that particular case, I think unfortunately that the individual who produced that report with the help of the AI had a very low taste. But the AI governance system is so important. Like, how do you make sure? Because if you expect everyone to behave exactly the same as you do, you're going to be disappointed. 100%. Guaranteed. Right? Because everyone have different level of the expectation. To solve that problem, to make sure that doesn't happen, you want to have the AI governance system in place to make sure that it prevents all those sort of things happen. That is the importance of the AI governance system. And if anyone, if the organization who are still on the fence about the AI, I think that's the first thing they should look at. And AI, one of the things that and one of the things that I also use as an analogy is that compared to crypto or compared to blockchain, where after all these 10, 15 years are yet to still see a good actual application that is leveraging the blockchain, whereas for AI, in just 2.5 years, we are seeing so many applications. AI is not going to go away. AI is definitely going to stay. So you want to be left behind. But if you're worried about it, how it would impact the reputation, then AI governance system is really one thing. They should start seeking it.
The more I've worked in the space and the more I've spoken to people, we as technologists in the space want to talk about explainability, interpretability, providence, transparency. And then we talk about that as a nuanced way to establish trust. But we do that because we don't fundamentally have the capabilities to explain why AI makes a decision. Like, that's the problem, right? The clarity with algorithm, I can trace you through with all the bugs that I've inserted in any code, I can at least tell you the logic eventually. When we go through the nuanced understanding of an AI system and these, really beginning to become very complex large language models or, other neural networks that can be applied, that ability to create traceability through that decision consequence is very difficult. And, I was reading a study the other day, right? When you do something like look at radiology, interpreting radiological reports, AI is amazing. Generally considered, plenty of literature around this to be better than humans. Not like endingly better, but definitely better. And there was another study around doctors' malpractices, analyzing all the different malpractices and trying to map that back to a decision criteria. Really bad. And really bad because these are really human interactions that occur that have so many things that reweight them in terms of an interpretation. So there are these different uses for AI, and I don't think we're talking about what's good and what's bad in terms of that use, and what's a good set of systems for the use and what's a bad set of systems for the use. When you're out talking to people, and I know you've written some articles around this, how do you talk about this good and bad and trust and this establishment? Because we can't do trust in the way we traditionally go, which is the trust is I can show you how it worked. Or in the case of a human, I can go and say, why did you make these decisions? Please tell me. The human will give you. The AI can't do that. And that's why it's different.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I often tell people, right, is that there are certain use cases where you can be very comfortable, right, and it is okay when it goes wrong. That is the certain use cases, especially some business use cases. But there are, however, some of the business use cases where you can't afford to be wrong. You can't afford to make mistakes. And that is where you have to put the human in the loop. So that is really number one. And number two, I actually think that we should work on the basic with the expectation that the very AI that we are seeing today is perhaps just the second stage of the AI. And with all these really intelligent people who are doing the research, who are finding ways to improve it, we should work on the basic that it will improve, it will get better, when one day it can be a deterministic system. So, and the thing that we know for sure already is that the imperfect system that we have got today right now has already had 800 million people as a weekly active user with ChatGPT. You know it's not going to go away. That's for sure. AI, whether we like it or not, is not going to go away. And often I tie it to the fundamental of the human nature, right? Is this thing going to make it easier for my life? Yes. Is this thing going to save me a lot of time? Given that those two conditions are satisfied, we are going to want to use it. It will improve. It will improve over time. So my view is that if you're not sure and if you are concerned, put human in the loop. What you need to understand though is that this thing is not going to go away. And if you don't do it now, someone else is going to come out a different way of disrupting your business with the use of the AI. And by the time you realize it, it's probably too late for you to do something about it. While the other party who was taking certain risks and also safeguarding themselves, those risks by putting the human in the room, implementing the AI governance system, they are a lot more ready than you are for not doing anything with AI. And in the near future, where some very, very intelligent people figure that out, they are going to fix this problem. They wouldn't have to worry about this problem. So that is my view of it.
I was going to ask you as a bit of a finish up question. I was going to ask you, what do you think the future looks like? But you've kind of just answered it. So I've got one quick follow up on that, Jason. Can you remember the time where your mind was changed when it came to AI? So what was the point in time and what was the pivot that said the position that you've just taken, which is, I know that we're going to keep using this. You asked yourself those couple of questions. Do you remember what that time was?
This is my standard question. You can't steal my question.
I'm stealing it. It's a good one. Bad luck.
I think my mind was changed on using AI. My mind was changed when the company like Google or OpenAI, where they introduced the AI that can make video and also graphic images a lot better than a few years ago. It's mind-blowing. I think it's mind-blowing. And you can imagine that without the AI, and if you have an actual graphic person doing that, it would take at least a few hours. Right? But now you can write in a prompt and it come out those video or those images in less than a minute. Yes, they are not perfect. I remember just about 2 years ago, they were horrible. But in just 2 years, they are getting so good already. What will happen in 10 years? So my mind was changed, not for the other way around in terms of I don't trust AI or I don't want to use AI or AI is not going to be useful. My mind was changed. I have to teach my kids how to use AI. I have to teach my kids how to grow up in this world of the AI where AI is going to perform a lot of those things much, much better than they do. They're going to have a fulfilling life and also fulfilling income, have a job or have a business if they are into that for the rest of their life. I think that is what I have to think about all the time.
Look, thank you very much for joining us today, Jason. This has really been a fantastic and super interesting conversation. For the listeners out there, where do they find you?
Well, find me on LinkedIn. So search for Jason Tang. Jason Tang has got the group Dutch, voice back. Or find me on my Substack, jpc10.substack.com. So those are the two places that would be best to find me.
Fantastic. Well, as I said, thank you for joining us. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thanks all for listening. I'm Anthony Woodward. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. We are also on LinkedIn, like Jason, under RecordPoint, to recordpoint.com/filed. For any additional filed experiences, I believe we even do an outtake of all the errors that Kris had in each of the previous filed episodes. There are some up there that Kris has done. They're quite amusing. So head over to recordpoint.com/filed for the outtake. And if you have any feedbacks, ideas for an episode, want to become a guest, or just want to come say hi, email us at filed@recordpoint.com.
And I'm Kris Brown, the guy who makes all the mistakes. We'll see you next time on Filed.
And thanks for having me. Yeah, it'd be great.
Thanks, Jason. Cheers, mate. Appreciate it.